In 1917, a terrifying machine appeared on the battlefields of Europe. It crushed barbed wire, flattened trenches, and crawled through mud with unstoppable force. Soldiers had never seen anything like it before. It was loud, heavy, industrial, a symbol of the brutal new kind of war the world had entered. This machine was called the tank. But thousands of miles away, in the elegant streets of Paris, someone looked at that same machine and saw something completely different. Not destruction, not warfare, but design. Within just a few years, that brutal war machine would inspire one of the most elegant watches ever created. A watch worn by royalty, artists, presidents, cultural icons. A watch that has remained almost unchanged for more than a century. This is the story of how a machine built for war became a masterpiece of elegance, the Cartier Tank. The year was 1917. World War I was transforming the world at a terrifying pace. New technologies were appearing on the battlefield faster than anyone had expected. Machine guns, poison gas, armored vehicles. Among the most revolutionary of these machines was the Renault FT-17 tank. Unlike earlier armored vehicles, the Renault tank had a distinctive silhouette when viewed from above. Two long metal tracks ran along each side. Between them sat the armored body of the vehicle. From a distance, the design looked surprisingly simple, rectangular, balanced, geometric. But on the battlefield, it was devastating. The tank could cross trenches, crush obstacles, and move across terrain that infantry could never survive. For soldiers fighting in the trenches, it must have looked like something from the future. Yet this brutal machine would soon inspire something entirely different. The man who saw beauty in the tank was Louis Cartier. Louis Cartier was not a soldier. He was not an engineer. He was a designer. The grandson of Louis-François Cartier, founder of the Cartier jewelry house in Paris. By the early 20th century, Cartier had become one of the most prestigious luxury houses in Europe. Kings, royal families, and aristocrats were among its clients. But Louis Cartier was more than a jeweler. He was fascinated by architecture, geometry, modern design. And when he saw the silhouette of the Renault tank, something clicked. Where soldiers saw a weapon, Cartier saw symmetry. Two parallel lines, a central structure, strong geometry, industrial, minimal, architectural. And to a designer like Cartier, that meant one thing: potential. Cartier translated the silhouette of the tank directly into the design of a watch. The long vertical bars of the case became known as brancards. They represented the tank's metal tracks. Between those bars sat the rectangular watch case, the body of the vehicle. At a time when almost every watch was round, this design felt radical. The Cartier tank rejected curves and decoration. Instead, it embraced strict geometry, straight lines, sharp proportions, perfect balance. It looked modern, industrial, almost futuristic. Yet somehow, it was incredibly elegant. That tension between strength and refinement would become the watch's defining character. In 1918, Louis Cartier completed the very first prototype, but instead of selling it, he gave it away. The recipient was General John Pershing, commander of the American Expeditionary Forces in Europe. The gesture was symbolic, a watch inspired by a battlefield machine placed on the wrist of one of the most powerful military leaders of the war. But while the tank was born from war, its future would be far more refined. In 1919, Cartier officially released the watch to the public. The model was called the Tank Normale. Only a small number were produced in the early years, yet even then, something about the design felt timeless. It did not rely on decoration. It did not chase fashion. It relied on proportion. And that would become the secret behind its longevity. Because the Cartier tank was not just a watch, it was a design language. The Cartier tank is instantly recognizable, even to people who know very little about watches. That's because every tank follows a strict visual code established more than a century ago. Each element of the design has a purpose. Together, they form a language of elegance.
The first signature element is the Roman numerals. Large numerals stretch across the dial, radiating outward from the center, creating balance and symmetry. But hidden inside these numerals is one of Cartier's most famous secrets. Look closely, and you might find the word Cartier hidden within the dial, often inside the VII or the X. It's a tiny signature, almost invisible, a quiet mark of authenticity. Another defining element is the chemin de fer. In French, the phrase means railway track. It refers to the minute track that frames the dial. This square track resembles the rails of a train line, subtle, precise, architectural. It reinforces the tank's geometric discipline. Then there are the hands. Cartier uses elegant blue steel hands shaped like slender swords. The color is not painted. It is created by heating steel to precise temperatures until it turns a deep blue, a technique watchmakers have used for centuries. Against the pale dial, the blue hands glow with quiet elegance. Another unmistakable feature sits on the side of the case, the winding crown. Every Cartier Tank crown is topped with a blue sapphire cabochon, a small polished gemstone. Simple, yet unmistakable. Together, these details form the DNA of the Cartier Tank. Roman numerals, railway minute track, blue sword hands, sapphire crown, Brancard sidebars. Once you recognize these elements, you can spot a Cartier Tank instantly, even from across a room. But over time, the Tank did something unusual. Instead of remaining just one watch, it evolved into an entire family, each with its own personality. One of the most elegant versions is the Cartier Louis Cartier. Introduced in the 1920s, this model softened the original design slightly. The edges became more rounded, the proportions more refined. Often crafted in gold or platinum, the Louis Cartier model represents the purest expression of the tank design. For many collectors, it is the definitive tank. Another popular model is the Tank Must, designed as a modern interpretation of the classic. Often produced in stainless steel, the Tank Must brought the design to a wider audience. But Cartier also introduced a fascinating innovation inside the Tank Must, a movement called solar beat. Unlike traditional watches, solar beat is powered by light. Tiny perforations hidden within the Roman numerals allow light to reach solar cells beneath the dial. The result is a watch that can run for up to 16 years before needing service. Luxury meets modern practicality. Other versions expanded the Tank family even further. The Tank Française introduced an integrated metal bracelet. The Tank Américain introduced a curved case that follows the shape of the wrist. And for collectors, the Cartier Privé collection reimagines historic tank designs in limited editions. Across all these variations, one thing remained unchanged: the design DNA. Over the decades, the Cartier Tank quietly became the watch of icons, not because it was flashy, but because it represented something deeper: taste, restraint, confidence. One of its most famous admirers was Andy Warhol. Warhol once said something that perfectly captured the philosophy of the tank. "I don't wear a tank to tell the time. In fact, I never wind it. I wear a tank because it's the watch to wear." To Warhol, the watch was not about function, it was about identity. Princess Diana also made the tank part of her personal style. After her divorce, she was often seen wearing a gold Cartier Louis Cartier. The watch became one of her signature accessories: elegant, understated, powerful. Even boxing legend Muhammad Ali wore a Cartier Tank, a man known for his strength, choosing one of the most elegant watches ever created. His choice proved something remarkable: elegance and strength are not opposites, they can coexist. Another famous example belonged to Jackie Kennedy. Her tank watch, gifted in 1962, later sold at auction for nearly $380,000. The buyer was Kim Kardashian. The sale demonstrated the cultural power of the Cartier Tank. It was no longer just a watch, it had become a symbol of history and design. More than a century has passed since Louis Cartier first sketched the idea. The world has changed dramatically. Technology has evolved. Entire industries have risen and fallen. Yet the Cartier tank remains almost exactly as it was in 1917. Two parallel brancards, a rectangular case, Roman numerals, blue hands, perfect geometry. The design never needed reinvention because it was already complete. It may be one of the most elegant transformations in design history, a machine built for war, reimagined as a symbol of refinement. From the muddy battlefields of World War I to the wrists of artists, royalty, and cultural icons, the Cartier tank proves something timeless. Great design does not age, it endures. And sometimes, the most beautiful objects in the world begin in the most unexpected places.